The starport of Zeroth's station was loud, crowded, and chaotic, a labyrinth of metal corridors, flashing signs in alien languages, and the smell of fuel and spices that reminded Kieran strangely of home. Ships from 1,000 worlds docked here every day. Merchants shouted over each other, selling exotic goods, rare minerals, and strange tech that humans often couldn't even understand. Among all the clamor, there was a place Kieran preferred to visit, the hidden corners of the station, where things the galaxy considered worthless could sometimes be treasures. Kieran was a human. That was immediately obvious among the crowd. Humans were considered slow, primitive, and simple by most of the galaxy. Alien races, with their multi-limbed dexterity, mental interfaces, and long lifespans, often looked at humans and shook their heads. Primitive creatures, they muttered. But Kieran didn't mind. He had learned over years of traveling between stars that humans might lack speed or advanced bioimplants, or elegant telepathy, but humans had something rare in the galaxy: persistence, creativity, and a stubborn sense of morality. Today, Kieran wandered deeper into the station than usual. He had heard whispers of an auction secret, illegal, and unsanctioned, where rejected individuals from different alien species were sold. Some were considered defective by their own kind. Some had ideas or abilities that were inconvenient to their societies, and some were simply unwanted. Kieran had never purchased anyone before, but something about curiosity and a sense of justice drew him here. The corridor opened into a large, dim chamber filled with cages. Kieran paused at the entrance. He had seen suffering before, but the sight of beings in chains never failed to stir something inside him. Alien forms of all shapes and sizes sat or stood quietly in their enclosures. Some were resigned, others defiant. Each one was a story, a life written off by those who claimed superiority. And then Kieran saw her. She was different. Lyra, the auction catalog called her, though it felt like a poor attempt at erasing her identity. Her body was slender, with delicate limbs, but her eyes, they were sharp, intelligent, and unbroken. Even in the chains, she radiated strength. Kieran noticed how she didn't plead or cry, didn't beg for freedom, didn't shrink. Instead, she studied everyone in the room with a piercing gaze, as if silently asking, "Do any of you see me for who I truly am?" The auctioneer, a tall, multi-armed alien with a metallic voice, began listing the next lot. Kieran didn't care about the bidding of others, the flashy tech, or the alien artifacts on display. He walked closer to Lyra's cage. She tilted her head slightly, but didn't avert her gaze. It was a subtle test, a challenge perhaps. "Fascinating, isn't she?" a voice said behind him. Kieran turned to see a small insectoid alien, wings fluttering nervously. "Fascinating?" Kieran asked, raising an eyebrow. "Defective, yes, but interesting," the insectoid said. "She has ideas, intelligence. Not what her species wants. They call her a mistake. And yet, she survives here, chained." Kieran nodded. He didn't need an explanation. He understood. In his travels, he had learned that being rejected in alien society didn't mean someone was weak. Often it meant they were different, creative, or morally strong in a way the rest could not comprehend. The bidding began. Aliens shouted numbers, clicking claws, or flashing holographic credits. Kieran stayed silent, watching. Most of the bidders were looking for slaves or servants. He had seen the chains and restraint devices on other individuals. It was obvious that these aliens had no real intention of giving anyone a life of freedom. Then he stepped forward. "I'll take her," Kieran said, his voice firm. Silence fell over the chamber. Humans rarely bought anything at these auctions, and never anything of value like Lyra. The other bidders paused, some chuckling in disbelief. "You human?" the auctioneer said, tilting his head. "Do you know what you are doing?" "She is complicated, high maintenance, defective, worthless, if you value your investment." "I value her freedom," Kieran said. "I'll pay the price." The auctioneer's metallic eyes narrowed, scanning him as though evaluating the risk. Then, after a long pause, he motioned to the other attendants. "Very well. Sold to the human." Chains clinked as Lyra was released from the cage and handed over. Her gaze remained steady, but Kieran could see the muscles in her shoulders tense. Freedom, even offered, was strange to her after so many years of captivity. He extended a hand gently. "I'm not here to own you," he said quietly. "You re-free. Whatever you want, whatever you choose, it's yours." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. There was a cautious trust there, a fragile, tentative connection. Kieran smiled, understanding that the real journey had just begun. The trip back to his ship was quiet. Lyra looked out the viewport, watching the stars streak past. Kieran didn't try to fill the silence with chatter. He let her think, observe, and adjust. By the time they docked on his modest starship, Kieran had already begun preparing a space where she could be herself. Wear chains, both physical and societal, would no longer bind her. Once aboard, Kieran gestured to a small medbay-like room. "We'll start by removing the chains," he said. The restraints clicked and slid off, and Lyra took a careful step forward, testing her freedom. For the first time in years, she could move without limitation. She spun, lifted her arms, and even laughed softly, an alien sound that resonated with relief and disbelief. Kieran watched her with quiet satisfaction. "Most of the galaxy sees humans as primitive," he said. "Maybe we are, but sometimes being primitive means you notice what others ignore. You value what others discard." Lyra's gaze softened, and a small smile appeared. It was not just relief, it was recognition. She had expected humans to be weak, incapable of moral courage. But here was one, simple and determined, who could see her as a person, not a mistake. Days passed on the ship. Kieran shared basic human food with her, and she learned quickly how to prepare it. She marveled at the simplicity of it, the warmth of sharing a meal in a quiet room away from judgment. Kieran showed her the ship's controls, the rudimentary technology. She quickly grasped concepts that most of the galaxy would assume impossible for a human mind. Yet instead of ridicule, he offered encouragement, explaining how humans often solved problems by thinking differently. By seeing connections others overlooked, in return, Lyra began to teach him about her own people's systems, their innovations, and ideas that had been rejected because they were unconventional. Kieran listened intently, fascinated. Humans might lack advanced technology, but their minds were capable of understanding, adapting, and improving upon anything, even alien designs that others had discarded as too strange. As the stars passed by, both human and alien began to understand something fundamental. Freedom was not just the absence of chains. Freedom was respect, trust, and recognition. And in that tiny moving ship, two very different beings began to build a partnership neither the galaxy nor their societies could have predicted. By the end of the first week, the chains were gone, not just the physical ones, but the weight of fear and doubt that had burdened Lyra for so long. Kieran, labeled primitive by the galaxy, had seen what others refused to see, and in doing so, he had begun a story that could change the perception of humanity across worlds. For now, the stars stretched endlessly ahead, and for the first time in years, Lyra could choose her own path. The hum of the starship engines was a gentle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat as it cruised through the quiet void of space. Kieran piloted the vessel with practiced hands, while Lyra moved slowly around the small cabin, testing her freedom. Every step she took felt foreign yet exhilarating. Like rediscovering a part of herself she had thought lost forever. For years, she had lived in chains, physical, yes, but also mental. Her people had rejected her, labeling her defective for thinking differently, for asking questions that others found inconvenient. She had been confined to a life where her value was ignored, where her intelligence was considered a liability. And now, here she was, in a ship with a human she barely knew, yet somehow, he had given her freedom. "I don't understand," Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice, soft and melodic, carried a cautious edge. "Why would you help me? Humans are primitive. You should," she paused, searching for the right word. "Leave me to my fate." Kieran looked at her calm and steady. Humans may be primitive in technology, but we're not primitive in understanding. I see what others refuse to see. I see value where others see flaws. Lyra studied him, skepticism lingering in her sharp eyes. Value. You paid for me. Like a piece of property. I bought your freedom, not your obedience, Kieran said firmly. I don't want you as a possession. I want you to be free, to decide what comes next. That is the only price I'm willing to pay. She blinked, uncertain. Freedom had always been an abstract concept to her, one she had only dreamed of. And now, she was being offered it without conditions. Slowly, she reached out and touched the small device that had once held her in chains. It was cold and lifeless now, harmless. A wave of emotions, relief, disbelief, cautious hope washed over her. For the next few days, they settled into a rhythm aboard the ship. Kieran showed her the basics of navigation, ship maintenance, and how to manage life in the small but functional cabin. He spoke in simple terms, explaining his human ways, his perspective, and the value of practical thinking. Lyra observed quietly, absorbing everything. Her mind, trained by years of high-level alien education, quickly grasped concepts that were unfamiliar to humans. But she noticed something remarkable. Kieran did not belittle her knowledge or dismiss her ideas. Instead, he encouraged her to share them. You think differently? He said one evening, as they watched a star cluster drift by the viewport. Most species would reject that. But humans, we value different ways of thinking. It helps us survive, and sometimes it lets us thrive. Lyra's gaze softened. Your people. They are not like mine. They do not care only for perfection or status, Kieran smiled. We care about survival, yes. But survival isn't just about being strong. It's about helping each other, understanding each other. That's why I saw you. You're strong, smart, and brave. You just needed someone who could see it. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to feel more than fear and suspicion. She laughed quietly at one of Kieran's jokes. Awkward human humor that had no translation in her own language. It was liberating. The sound startled her at first. She had almost forgotten she could express joy freely as the days turned into a week. Lyra began to explore the ship more boldly. She touched the controls, tested the small kitchen, and even climbed to the observation deck to study the stars. Kieran gave her space, letting her explore at her own pace. And in return, she began to teach him about her world, her species' sciences, philosophies, and innovative ways of thinking. You see, she explained one evening, holding a holographic projection of a complex energy system. My people rejected this design because it was unconventional. It could have improved efficiency, reduced waste, and even saved lives, but they deemed it too different, too risky. They preferred tradition over innovation. Kieran leaned closer, examining the projection. Humans would call this clever. Sometimes we fail, but we try anyway. We value ideas that solve problems, even if they seem strange at first. She tilted her head, considering his words. Your species values creativity over perfection? Sometimes, Kieran admitted with a shrug. Sometimes we value courage, sometimes compassion, and yes, creativity. It's what lets us survive in a galaxy that often underestimates us. Lyra found herself smiling more often, a small rebellion against the years of doubt and rejection. She began to understand that freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice. Here she could learn, teach, explore, and even make mistakes without fear of punishment. One evening, as the ship glided past a glowing nebula, Lyra approached Kieran with a question that had been forming in her mind. Human, do you think my people will forgive me for leaving? For being different? Kieran looked at her thoughtfully. Forgiveness is not always theirs to give. What matters is that you forgive yourself. You survived. You were brave. And now, you have the chance to live on your own terms. That's more than most ever get. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She had spent so long trying to fit into a society that saw her as a mistake, that she had almost forgotten she could define herself. Kieran had reminded her. Slowly, she realized she was not weak. She was strong, resilient, and capable of more than even her own people had believed. In the days that followed, they began planning their next steps. Kieran suggested finding a place where Lyra could be truly free, away from the judgmental eyes of alien societies. Lyra listened carefully, absorbing every detail, and for the first time she contributed her own ideas. Together, they plotted a course to a neutral system, one that was remote enough to avoid interference, but habitable enough to allow them to start anew. During one quiet moment, Lyra asked Kieran about his species' reputation. "Why do others call you primitive?" she asked. Kieran chuckled softly. "Because we don't look or act like them. We don't have the enhancements, the long lifespans, or the complex technology they admire. But primitive or not, we have something they often lack: the ability to see value where others see none. The courage to do what is right and the stubbornness to survive against all odds." Lyra considered this, realizing that her own rejection had been based on similar misunderstandings. Her society valued perfection over potential, conformity over creativity. Humans valued action, thought, and heart. And that was why Kieran had saved her when no one else would. By the time they reached the edge of the neutral system, Lyra felt a change within herself. She walked freely across the ship's deck, her posture proud and unburdened. She had survived chains for years, but she was no longer defined by them. Her thoughts, ideas, and spirit were entirely her own. Kieran observed her silently, pride swelling in his chest. Humanity may have been labeled primitive, but it was this very humanity, its empathy, courage, and ingenuity that had brought about her liberation. He realized that sometimes the most primitive species could achieve the most extraordinary acts. As they prepared to land on the uninhabited planet where they planned to rest and plan their future, Lyra turned to him. "Human, thank you," she said, her voice steady but warm. "Not just for freeing me, but for seeing me." Kieran smiled. "You would have done the same for me. Maybe not in chains, but you understand. Freedom is not about being unbound, it's about being recognized." For the first time in years, Lyra truly felt free, not just in body, but in spirit. And she realized that her journey was just beginning. With Kieran beside her, she had a chance to explore not only the stars, but the limits of what she could achieve. The ship descended toward the planet's surface, gliding through the atmosphere with ease. Below, the land stretched wide, and untouched forests, rivers, and mountains waiting to be explored. Here, in this untouched corner of the galaxy, Lyra could be herself without fear. She could learn, teach, and grow. And humanity, once considered primitive, had given her that chance. That night, as the stars shone over the planet, Lyra stood outside the ship and looked up. She no longer felt small or insignificant. She was no longer defined by rejection or chains. She was free. And in that freedom, she found a strength she had never known. A strength born not from perfection, but from survival, courage, and the quiet, unyielding humanity of a man who had refused to see her as anything less than remarkable. The journey ahead would be long, filled with challenges, but for the first time, Lyra felt ready. Ready to think, ready to act, ready to live. Kieran had given her freedom, but more importantly, he had given her trust, and in that trust, she discovered the first true glimpse of hope in years. The small planet they had chosen was quiet, almost untouched. Its forests stretched in green waves and rivers glinted like silver ribbons under the sun. For Kieran and Lyra, it was the perfect place to start anew. Yet even in this isolation, the galaxy could not remain silent. News traveled fast. Somehow, whispers of a human buying a rejected alien woman and granting her freedom spread through interstellar networks. Some laughed at the idea, calling it foolishness. Others were shocked, their minds struggling to comprehend that a primitive human could act with such moral courage. A few quietly admired it, secretly questioning their own society's strict hierarchies. For Lyra, the outside attention was disorienting. She had spent years being invisible, discarded by her own people. And now, she was a topic of conversation across multiple star systems. It was thrilling, but also frightening. We should expect visitors, Kieran said one evening, as they prepared their camp near a crystal-clear lake. Not all of them will be friendly, Lyra nodded. Her senses were sharper than humans, attuned to the subtle signs of approaching ships. I know some of my people will come, she admitted. They cannot understand that I choose to live differently. Some will try to take me back. Kieran placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then we will show them what freedom and courage look like. Within days, the first ship arrived. It was sleek, metallic, and clearly a craft of the Xylan, the species that had rejected Lyra. Its engines glowed blue as it hovered. Above the clearing, a small landing party disembarked, 3 figures in formal armor. Their eyes sharp, their posture rigid. Lyra's heart tightened. She had expected confrontation, but seeing her former peers in person brought back old fears. They approached cautiously, their voices formal and cold. Lyra Xylan, the tallest, said, his tone commanding. You have defied your people and society. Return with us immediately, or face the consequences. Lyra straightened her spine. For years, she had been labeled defective, powerless, and unworthy. And now, she would not cower. I am not returning, she said clearly. I am free, and I choose to live on my own terms. The Xylan officer's eyes narrowed. You do not understand the consequences. Your people will not tolerate this. Your actions bring dishonor. Kieran stepped forward, his human presence calm but firm. She understands perfectly. She is not a child. She is intelligent, capable, and more than capable of making her own decisions. You cannot take that away from her. The Xylan were taken aback. They had never met a human who spoke with such authority, who dared to challenge their rigid societal rules. Kieran's demeanor, his simple yet unwavering courage, made them hesitate. Lyra saw the hesitation and seized it. She began to explain in careful but precise terms the ideas and innovations she had developed while in captivity projects her society had rejected. Systems that could improve efficiency, reduce waste, and even save lives. She spoke with clarity and confidence, demonstrating not only her intellect but her resilience. Kieran watched her with pride. She was no longer the timid, chained individual he had first encountered. She was strong, brilliant, and fearless. And together, they presented a vision of a partnership the galaxy had never considered. Human ingenuity combined with alien intellect. United by trust and freedom rather than fear and hierarchy. The Xylan officers whispered among themselves. Lyra's words were undeniable. Her ideas had merit, and her resolve was unshakable. They had rejected her once, labeling her defective, but here she stood, free, capable, and unbowed. We'll reconsider, one of them said finally, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. But you must understand, Lyra. Your actions are unprecedented. Lyra met his gaze evenly. I understand, and I am prepared to face the consequences of my choices. The Xylan withdrew, leaving Kieran and Lyra alone in the clearing. For a moment, the silence felt heavy, but then Lyra exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and triumph washing over her. You see, Lyra said gently, they cannot take your freedom unless you allow them to. And right now, you do not. Lyra smiled. I understand now. I am not defined by chains, by rejection, or by the judgments of others. I am defined by my actions, my thoughts, and the choices I make. Over the following weeks, more visitors arrived. Curious observers from different species who had heard of the human who had defied the galaxy's expectations. Some came with suspicion, others with admiration. Kieran and Lyra welcomed those who wished to learn, sharing knowledge and ideas. They demonstrated how humans, often dismissed as primitive, could innovate, empathize, and act with courage where more technologically advanced species hesitated in one encounter. A group of alien engineers presented a complex energy system, claiming it could not be improved. Lyra and Kieran examined it together, discussing modifications. Within hours, he proposed a solution that increased efficiency and reduced waste, an improvement the engineers had never imagined. The aliens were astonished, and their respect for humanity grew quietly but unmistakably. For Lyra, these experiences were transformative. She had once believed that freedom meant merely being unchained. Now, she saw that true freedom came with responsibility, the responsibility to act, to teach, to innovate, and to show others the value of courage and compassion. Kieran, too, learned from these interactions. He observed how alien societies often clung to rigid rules, prioritizing status over potential, tradition over creativity. He realized that humans, though labeled primitive, had a unique strength: the ability to see beyond superficial judgments, to value individuals for their character and ideas rather than their rank or origin. As the months passed, the clearing on the planet became a small hub of knowledge and collaboration. Lyra trained with aliens and humans alike, demonstrating leadership, problem-solving, and innovation. Kieran continued to navigate the galaxy, bringing supplies, information, and human ingenuity wherever it was needed. Together, they built a reputation not of power, but of integrity, courage, and creativity. Yet challenges remained. Some alien societies could not forgive what they considered a breach of protocol. They sent envoys to challenge Lyra and Kieran, testing their resolve and attempting to intimidate them. But each time, the human-alien duo responded with logic, empathy, and strategic thinking, proving that strength was not measured by weapons or technology alone. In one memorable encounter, a delegation of Xylan nobles arrived, demanding that Lyra return and face punishment for defying her society. Kieran and Lyra greeted them with calm dignity. Lyra spoke first, outlining her contributions and innovations, demonstrating how her ideas could benefit not just her people, but the galaxy as a whole. Kieran added the human perspective, emphasizing morality, freedom, and the practical value of creativity. By the end of the meeting, the nobles were silent. Unable to refute the evidence or the confidence of the two individuals before them, for the first time, they began to question their own rigid systems, realizing that rejection did not equate to weakness, and that humans long dismissed as primitive possessed a clarity of thought and moral courage that many species lacked. Lyra turned to Kieran as the delegation departed. "I never imagined humans could inspire such change," she said softly. Kieran smiled. "It isn't just humans. It's courage, empathy, and the willingness to act. You had that all along. I just helped you see it and helped others see it too." The partnership between human and alien grew stronger with each challenge. Lyra's confidence blossomed, her ideas gained recognition, and her presence began to shift perceptions across multiple worlds. And Kieran, once dismissed as primitive, became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when guided by morality, ingenuity, and determination. The galaxy was beginning to see humans differently. No longer were they merely simple, slow, or primitive. They were capable of extraordinary acts that could challenge conventions, uplift the rejected, and inspire even the most advanced societies to reconsider what truly mattered. And for Lyra, that realization was deeply personal. The chains that had bound her for years, chains of metal, judgment, and societal rejection, were gone. She had found her place in the galaxy, not by conforming, but by living authentically, boldly, and without fear. Kieran watched her as she worked with alien engineers, explaining her ideas and guiding their experiments. He felt a quiet pride. Humanity might be labeled primitive, but it was exactly this primitiveness, the courage to see, to care, and to act, that allowed them to change the galaxy, one life at a time. Together, human and alien continued to build a future where freedom, respect, and creativity could flourish. And even as challenges loomed on distant worlds, they knew one truth: no chain, no judgment. No rigid hierarchy could ever suppress the potential of those who dared to act with courage and heart in that quiet clearing. Under the light of twin suns, Kieran and Lyra looked toward the horizon. The galaxy might still doubt humanity, but they had already begun to prove that the smallest spark of courage could ignite change across the stars. For a human labeled primitive and an alien once rejected, the journey was far from over. But the foundation of trust, freedom, and ingenuity they had built together was unshakably, and the galaxy was watching. The neutral planet had become more than a refuge. It was a small beacon of change. The forested valleys and glimmering rivers provided a quiet backdrop. But the real transformation was happening within its human and alien inhabitants. Lyra had begun to thrive as a leader. While Kieran's presence and guidance reminded everyone of humanity's unique strengths, courage, empathy, and ingenuity. From the edge of the settlement, Kieran observed Lyra as she spoke to a group of alien engineers. Pointing at blueprints and making calculations that simplified complicated energy systems, her confidence had grown beyond anything he had imagined. She moved with a calm authority, her voice firm yet kind, inspiring trust without demanding it. Humans, once labeled primitive, were now part of this new community. They worked alongside aliens, sharing knowledge, helping build infrastructure, and teaching practical skills. Their technology was simple compared to the advanced alien systems, but their solutions were clever and efficient. Kieran often watched alien visitors frown at the simplicity of human tools, only to be surprised by how effective they were in practice. Humans. One alien engineer admitted quietly to another, they think differently. Their solutions. They are simple, yet brilliant. It's unlike anything we have considered. Lyra smiled, overhearing the conversation. That's because humans see value where others see limitations, she said. They measure success not just by complexity, but by impact. The settlement had attracted more than curious observers. Rejected individuals from various alien societies had arrived, drawn by the promise of freedom, respect, and opportunity. Kieran and Lyra welcomed them all, helping them adapt to a life where their ideas and talents were recognized rather than suppressed. The community grew steadily, diverse in species and culture, united by a simple principle: freedom and respect above all. But the galaxy outside was not yet fully convinced. Reports of the human-alien settlement had reached multiple star systems. Some rulers feared it, seeing humans as unpredictable and potentially disruptive. Others were intrigued, secretly sending delegations to observe the primitive humans who had dared to defy norms. The first official delegation arrived. Several months after the settlement was established, they represented the Coalition of Advanced Worlds, a council of species known for their rigid hierarchies and pride in technological superiority. Their ships hovered above the settlement, gleaming metal reflecting the twin suns. Kieran and Lyra prepared carefully, knowing this meeting could change the way humanity was perceived across the galaxy. The delegates landed in the main courtyard of the settlement. Lyra stepped forward first, standing beside Kieran. Her posture was confident, her gaze steady. The alien delegates looked at her with curiosity, some with thinly veiled disdain. They expected weakness, perhaps fear. What they found instead was strength and clarity. Lyra Xylan, the tallest delegate, began. His voice formal and commanding. You have defied your species and allied with humans, who are widely considered primitive. Explain this. Anomaly. Lyra smiled calmly. There is no anomaly. Humans are capable of ingenuity, courage, and moral clarity. They value what others often ignore, the potential in every individual. Kieran did not buy me as property. He gave me freedom, respect, and opportunity. That is why this settlement exists. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. They had not expected such direct words, nor had they anticipated the calm authority of an alien who had once been considered defective. Kieran stepped forward. We may be considered primitive, he said, his voice steady, but we act with purpose. We see the value in others, and we empower them. That is what makes us strong, not implants, technology, or status, but our ability to think, to care, and to act. Silence followed. The delegates had not encountered a human who spoke with such confidence and moral weight. For years they had dismissed humanity as insignificant, a minor species in the galactic hierarchy. Now, they faced undeniable proof that humans could change the lives of others, even reshape the perception of an entire galaxy. One of the delegates, a four-armed being with luminous skin, stepped forward. You claim that humans can uplift and inspire. Can you demonstrate this? Lyra gestured to the settlement. Observe. These are individuals who are rejected by their own societies. Look at their work, their ideas, their innovations. They thrive here not because of technology alone, but because they are respected, valued, and free to think. The delegates walked through the settlement, witnessing humans and aliens working side by side. They saw the energy systems Lyra had improved. The small but efficient human tools adapted to alien technology, and the happiness and confidence of those who had once been discarded. Each sight challenged their preconceived notions of what strength and civilization truly meant. By the time the delegation concluded its tour, the tallest delegate spoke again. I underestimated humanity, and perhaps my species has underestimated the value of freedom and respect. Kira nodded. Strength is not measured by weapons or technology alone. It is measured by courage, empathy, and the ability to uplift others. The delegates departed quietly, leaving Kieran and Lyra standing side by side. Lyra exhaled softly. They are beginning to understand, she said. Kieran smiled. Yes. Slowly, the galaxy is realizing that humans are not primitive. We are capable of great things because we care. As the settlement continued to grow, Lyra took on a more formal leadership role. She mentored other rejected individuals, teaching them how to innovate, collaborate, and think independently. Kieran remained at her side, guiding, observing, and occasionally reminding her of the human way, to act boldly when necessary, and to value every life, no matter how insignificant it might seem to others. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the forested mountains, Lyra and Kieran stood on a small hill overlooking the settlement. The air was crisp, filled with the sounds of life, laughter, conversation, and the hum of machines working efficiently. Do you ever think about what your people would say if they saw this? Lyra asked, her eyes reflecting the golden light. Kieran shrugged. They'd probably still call us primitive, he said with a grin. But that doesn't matter. We are showing the galaxy a different kind of power. One based on courage, morality, and ingenuity. Lyra smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had been rejected, discarded, and overlooked. Yet here she was, a leader in a growing community, respected not because of rank or perfection, but because of her actions, her ideas, and her integrity. Humans, she said softly, have taught me more about life and freedom than my own people ever did. And you, Kieran replied, have shown humans that courage and ingenuity exist in every species, not just our own. Together, we've created something remarkable. The night passed with a quiet serenity, but beyond the planet, the galaxy continued to watch. Reports of the human-alien settlement spread further, challenging long-held beliefs about species, hierarchy, intelligence, and morality. Humanity's reputation began to shift on because of conquest or technology. But because of their ability to see value in the discarded, to act with courage, and to uphold principles of respect and freedom in the months that followed. Other species began sending emissaries to learn, collaborate, and observe. Some came skeptically, but all left inspired by what they saw. The settlement became a hub of innovation, diplomacy, and moral leadership, a testament to the power of humanity and the courage of a once-rejected alien woman. For Lyra, every day was a victory over the chains she had once lived under. She walked freely, spoke confidently, and created with purpose. Her past no longer defined her. Her choices did, and with Kieran by her side, she realized that freedom was more than absence of restraint. It was the ability to inspire, teach, and lead. Kieran too felt the weight and joy of what they had accomplished. Humans may have been dismissed as primitive, but in their simplicity lay a remarkable strength, the courage to act morally, the ingenuity to solve problems, and the ability to see value in ways the galaxy had long forgotten. Together, they had built more than a settlement. They had built a vision of the galaxy as it could be, a place where intelligence and worth were measured not by labels or technology, but by courage, empathy, and the willingness to act for the greater good, the galaxy had begun to notice. Slowly, species once dismissive of humanity started to reconsider. Stories spread of the human who defied expectations, of the rejected alien who found freedom, and of the settlement where species worked side by side, creating solutions that no rigid hierarchy had allowed before. Kieran looked at Lyra. The golden sun, casting long shadows across the forested valley. "We've started something," he said quietly. Lyra nodded, a gentle smile on her face. "Yes, something that will grow far beyond this planet, beyond our species. The galaxy will see that freedom, respect, and courage are the true measures of civilization." And in that moment, under twin suns and infinite stars, the primitive humans and the once rejected alien had changed the course of the galaxy not through conquest, domination, or fear, but through the simple, extraordinary power of empathy, courage, and action. For humanity, the label primitive had become irrelevant. What mattered now was what they could do what they could inspire others to do.